Welcome back, everybody, to another episode of the Junkyard Dawgcast. I'm your host, Jordan Hill. Got Kipp Adams with us on this Wednesday afternoon. Our guy, Ben Wolk, is on a much-deserved vacation. We got a lot to tackle this week, a lot going on around Georgia athletics, including Kirby Smart getting a big extension. But, Kipp, we got to start off. Welcome back from your big trip over to Italy. Tell us, what was a trip like? What was your vacation like? What was your favorite part of the trip?
Yeah, Jordan, it was definitely one of those vacations where now that I'm back, I kind of need a vacation from the vacation. Seeing an incredible country from Venice, to Florence to Rome, Amalfi Coast. It was it was an incredible trip. Went off planned for about 5 years and was, just really lucky to be able to finally get out there and see everything that one of the most famous European countries had to offer. And I mean, the pasta lived up to it. I'm not going to say that the coffee matches what we're able to get here in the States. Obviously, you order a coffee there, you get in a 1 ounce espresso pull, but everything else matched up to the hype. A lot of incredible, sights. Seeing something like the Sistine Chapel is just kind of like, mesmerizing. The Colosseum, walking through there. But, I'm glad to be back. I'm still recuperating. But if anyone has the opportunity to go and visit, it's definitely worth it. Just give yourself enough runway, enough time to try to actually see the country, because I'm still kind of in a blur trying to remember everything I saw. But I definitely hope the country is able to restock its pasta and wine storages, because I put, I did numbers in those aspects, and no regrets there at all.
What was the best thing you ate while you were in Italy?
Oh my gosh, there was a lemon pasta. It was in Capri, and it was like the setting was great. You're on this island. There's lemon trees all around you, and they brought out this lemon. I think it was like I'm gonna butcher it, but it was like a matriana pasta, which is like just a shortcut pasta, so I didn't have to worry about using my fork correctly and or looking like Lady in the Tramp trying to eat long spaghetti type pasta. But the flavor on that was incredible. The steak Florentine in Florence, it definitely lived up to its billing. But I think I've thought about that pasta as often as most people think about the Roman Empire on a daily basis, and I'll never forget that pasta. I am completely ruined in that aspect from ordering any pasta anytime soon.
Yeah, it looked like a fun trip for sure, and I'm glad to hear that you guys had a good time. Well, let's get into something that actually happened while you guys were still over in Italy. Kirby Smart getting a big extension. It's a 2-year extension that takes him through December 2033. Sees a pay bump of nearly $2 million. Probably most notably, he is up to $13 million annually, which pushes him past Clemson's Dabo Swinney as the top paid head coach in college football. I don't think this was necessarily surprising, just with what success Kirby's had and the growing belief that he's going to coach at Georgia as long as he wants to. But Kipp, what is your reaction to this extension? Seeing Kirby now locked in for another decade at Georgia, and obviously now becoming the top paid coach in college football.
Yeah, I know people still don't want to, hear his name brought up every time Kirby Smart's name is brought up. But obviously, with Nick Saban retiring, I mean, Kirby Smart is the undisputed top coach in college football. And now, for once, Kirby will be able to get an extension that doesn't result in, Saban getting his contract extended right after the fact. I believe he had that clause that he had to always be the highest paid coach in college football. But now, Kirby gets, his opportunity to kind of to take that mantle himself. And of course, I mean, when you go 20-0 in Athens since 2020, when you win multiple national championships, you make 3 college football playoffs. I think he has earned this payday. You have a 94-16 overall record in 8 seasons, and your program, the trajectory is not changed. Everyone expects Georgia to be in the hunt for national championships for as long as Kirby Smart's in Athens. This is the kind of contract you want to get. And I think that we've talked about how long Kirby Smart's going to coach at Georgia. This deal runs through the end of 2033. That's enough runway for fans to kind of sit back and go, okay, we have, 9 more seasons of Kirby Smart, and we've just seen what he's done in his first, 8 seasons as the head coach. So this is right now just an outstanding time to be a Georgia fan. So instead of worrying about how long he's going to coach, think about, if this is the worst case scenario and he's at the halfway point of his coaching career, then you could, the expectations is that he should be able to match what he's done so far. And what an outstanding just thing to think about. If you have 4 to 5 national championships in 2033, I don't think any Georgia fans are going to be disappointed, with how things unfolded during Kirby Smart's tenure as Georgia's head coach.
I thought you made a good point there about, being around the halfway point, because that sort of matches what he told Josh Pate when he sat down with Josh talking about his career and where he is. And I talked about this over on our TikTok channel right after the extension was announced. But I thought it was really interesting after the 2023 season. There's never really been any talk about Kirby going to the NFL. He spent the 1 year when he was on the Dolphin staff with Nick Saban. But I thought after 2023, if there was a time that you would even hear a rumor about Kirby going pro, that would be the time, because the playoff is expanding. So much has changed around college football, NIL, all the pieces of it. Is like, if he were to jump or even want to put feelers out there about jumping, this would make the most sense. And you heard none of that. Never heard his name mentioned one time for an NFL job. To me, that made it very clear to me that, as long as he's coaching, it's going to be at Georgia. And I think everybody's been on the same page as far as this goes. And, you look at college football as it stands right now, I don't think you could argue anyone in college football right now is a better head coach, because Nick Saban's retired, because Jim Harbaugh went back to the NFL. I don't think there's anyone in 2024 that you could make a legitimate argument is better than Kirby. So I think that this made a ton of sense for everybody involved. I think Kirby's locked in and ready to keep this thing going. And again, not surprised to see it. And I think, the go-to for me talking about Kirby in Georgia, he's worth every penny. I mean, think about how close this program has come in the years. It's so funny now to me, so many people now look back, I don't think necessarily fairly on the Mark Richt era, just because they never quite broke through. They were still really, really successful. They just never won a national title. But Kirby deserves a ton of credit for helping the program get over that hump, and he's being paid for that success, and I think rightfully so.
Yeah, you mentioned the NFL, and some people wonder why Georgia would give him this extension now. Were they just competing with themselves and giving him a raise? They don't really need the boost in recruiting. There's obviously no hot seat involved or any other program that in college football that could really hire Kirby Smart away, or even probably get him on the phone. You just look at the NFL, and that is obviously the only competition Georgia really has for Kirby Smart right now. And so by paying him this much, he's effectively a top 5 paid a football coach, period, regardless of level. I think he would be 5th in the NFL right now, ahead of a guy like Mike Tomlin, who's as consistent as you can be as an NFL head coach. So as of right now, the only coaches that are getting paid more than him are Sean McVay, Sean Payton, Andy Reid. I do think the Chargers, Jim Harbaugh got paid more, but that's kind of where Georgia is now, competing to keep Kirby Smart. And so for those who are, wondering, is he worth it? Obviously, how much is too much? I just think you do look at the NFL and you go, that's kind of where the bar is going to be when you're the most successful coach in your sport, and knowing that there is technically a tier above you, I think Georgia's probably going to try and keep Kirby Smart, as long as he's as successful as he is right now, right there in the top 5 of all football coaches. So I think that's just kind of the bar set moving forward. If you see NFL coaches get paid more, if it gets up to 15 million, then that's where Kirby Smart's probably going to be paid as well.
I want to make sure I mention too that athletic director Josh Brooks also got a pay bump, also got an extension through 2030. I don't think it was a coincidence that they announced those extensions and those pay bumps in lockstep. I mean, I think it's sort of showing you where the leadership is, and that both of them are on the same page as far as Kirby Smart and Josh Brooks. So I wanted to mention that. So Kip, I want to throw a curveball to you. So we're saying he is under contract through December 2033. All right, let's say Kirby coaches all of those years that he coaches through the 2033 season. Over under on 2.5 national championships in that time.
I thought you would set it, because 4.5 is where, if I'm Vegas, that's exactly where I'd set as far as Georgia national championships under Kirby Smart. Knowing that he's going to basically get into the college football playoff every year now, I'll take the over and say Georgia gets 3 more national championships before this contract runs out. And I think that's where the expectation should be. They're going to have a top 5 roster, and in the current format, and knowing that the transfer portal, NIL, continues to change all the time. As of right now, it does still seem like Kirby Smart has a grasp on how to manage that roster of 85 plus players, as well as any coach in college football. And again, roster management is the number one key to being competitive in this college football playoff era. So I think, as long as nothing changes right now, Kirby's set up to win a couple more. 3 is probably where that expectation should be.
Yeah, I would agree 100%. 3 is the number. As I was sitting there, as the wheels were turning to try to hit you with that over under, I think 3 is reasonable. And think about now, I mean, he's got more leeway. Georgia has more leeway in the playoff, where, if they're in a 12-team playoff last year, did they wind up avenging that Alabama loss and win the national title? I mean, I think they had a really good shot in that scenario. So yeah, I think 3 national titles is totally plausible. And I know one thing, it's going to be fascinating to see how it plays out. So speaking of Kirby Smart, I wanted to mention briefly, he and several other SEC coaches were down in Hoover on Wednesday to participate in the annual Pro-Am that goes on over there. Kirby talked very, very briefly to the media just about some of the different topics going on right now. I thought what was the most interesting thing, and I'm going to read verbatim what he had to say. He was asked about the SEC's transfer portal rule, and specifically that if you're going to transfer within the conference, there's a deadline of February 1st for you to do that. You saw guys like Brock Vandergriff going from Georgia to Kentucky. Georgia brought in multiple SEC guys who had gone in the portal. Hearing what Kirby had to say about it, he said that he was comfortable with the rule being permanent. Quote, I think that's important that we're not fighting each other's rosters during the springtime. Don't think it's very good for our league. It's probably good for other leagues, because I've had several coaches outside our league tell me they hope we keep that because it gives them an opportunity to gain SEC players. It's something that's been in for a while, and I support it. And this is really what struck me. He was asked as a follow-up, basically, is it a disadvantage to have this rule? Because if you're an SEC team after spring ball, you can't get someone from another SEC team. And Kirby said, I don't see it as a disadvantage because we keep our players. So, he kind of made it known how he felt about that. But I thought that his reasoning makes sense. I think that when you look at it, the SEC, I kind of think they hit a compromise. They decided that they couldn't really stick with you can't transfer within the conference anymore. But you can, but we're going to give you this deadline, and it's going to be before spring practice. And I think, especially when you look at, Georgia is one of the halves in the SEC. There's probably not going to be a ton of situations where after spring practice, they're hunting for another SEC player. What did you think of what Kip? What did you think about what Kirby had to say about that SEC deadline and the fact that Kirby wants to stick with it going forward.
I mean, I can see why he wants to. If you have more stability than any program in the country, why would you want things to change? You just watched Alabama's program get gutted, and it's just the way that the calendar doesn't work in a sense, because the players just watched Nick Saban leave, and they just still kind of coming down from their season ending in the college football playoff, and you have to make a decision immediately, and you're still taking classes. Your coach left, you got finals, but you have to evaluate whether you want to stay in this conference or not within this window. It was madness to watch, and we watched Alabama players enter the portal and then ultimately come back to Alabama. It was just a very unique scenario that probably isn't going to happen a lot in this conference. But I just think that, as a new coach, you would be very frustrated just not being able to, convince your players to stay, or and then other coaches in the conference, I'm sure, are frustrated because they're not able to recruit certain players. But yeah, I mean, it does make sense. It kind of gives you that middle compromise of allowing players in the SEC a window and an opportunity to still stay within this conference, but also preventing schools from just completely poaching each other's roster, after their spring games. So I think right now it's the best use of this, but it definitely puts a lot of heat on players during that, the end of the season, that window. There's just so much going on, and we talked about that when this was happening. It's a lot for a player to work through. But I guess overall for the conference, it's just the best way to prevent just coaches from just going, completely nuts on and recruiting each other's rosters. And it would definitely make for a very entertaining, SEC media days or SEC spring meetings when, if you had 15 to 20 players switching teams within the conference during the spring.
Yeah, I think it could get really, really ugly if they let that happen. I want to make sure and mention everybody keep an eye out over on dogs247.com. I will have some stories out of what Kirby had to say down there in Hoover. And I want to share probably the most relatable thing that I've ever had with Kirby Smart. He was asked about his golf game. He said, "Not good. So I've got to go hit some balls, need about an hour." That's about as relatable as I've ever felt to Kirby Smart. I would have probably needed more than an hour, especially, man, I get intimidated watching them hit. I know that they do play a lot of golf, but they've got galleries on either side of them. I'd be worried to death I'd wind up hitting somebody. All right, we're going to take a quick break, come back, talk about a big commitment decision coming for a Georgia target, talk about UJA hoops, and circle back on that NFL draft. Well, Kipp, we are at the point in the late spring, coming up on the summer, when we will start seeing kids committing. It's going to be a big string of decisions coming up, and Sunday is going to be one to watch. Going to be a lot going on Mother's Day, but among the things, three-star receiver Thomas Blackshear is going to be announcing his commitment at the Calvary Day School standout. Looks like it's going to be between Georgia and Tennessee. This is a big target for Georgia in the 25 class. I will say I like what I've heard about where Georgia stands, but we've seen the success Tennessee has had with its receivers in past years. I think it's going to make for a very interesting Sunday and a very interesting decision. What do you make of Georgia's pursuit of Thomas Blackshear? And if they're able to land him, just what kind of addition, especially having a receiver like this in state, would mean for the Bulldogs.
We've talked about this class of wide receivers in Georgia for a while. It's as deep as I think I've seen, and now at 18 cycles of covering Georgia recruiting. It's an incredible group. And, we talked early on a lot about Travis Smith at Westlake. Now CJ Wiley is just exploded on the scene, and his stock continues to skyrocket. I think, as far as tools, he's elite. He has everything you want in a wide receiver. Thomas Blackshear has been mentioned over and over as just being, you need a guy to make you a play right now, or, whatever you're going to ask him to do. I think he's got that skill set at 6'1", pushing 200 pounds. He's a talented athlete, a two-way player. And, Florida State have tried to get in the mix here. And as you said, coming down to Georgia and Tennessee, the fact that he's got the Georgia official visit already lined up, but has not set one for Tennessee. If you're looking for a hint, that's probably a good sign for Georgia. I'm really fascinated overall just by what Georgia's going to do at the wide receiver position this cycle, because they took a couple transfers that have multiple years of eligibility, and I think that's going to affect the wide receiver numbers. I initially thought they could take up to 5 guys at the wide receiver position in this class, and while I do think they'll take a couple athletes, like Blackshear, who could potentially play multiple positions in college, I'm looking at it right now, and I think they end up just taking 3 wide receivers in this class. And I know that Blackshear is one of the guys that they've really honed in on and they love. But once you get a guy like that on board, again, the numbers are going to get real tight at this position. They'll find a way. A guy like Wiley, they will battle LSU down to the wire for him. But I think right now, like where Georgia stands with him, and then you just kind of start looking at that, the other guys that they're after right now, and they're going to have to make some tough decisions. And I think James Coley's put them in, a great position to be able to make tough decisions. I mean, you got guys in state like Sam Turner, Maurice Gleaton. You got out-of-state guys. Eugene Hilton's loved them for a long time, but Taylon Taylor's been on campus a dozen times, it seems, at this point, if not more. There are a lot of guys that Georgia is in the mix with. I'm fascinated to see what does this board look like for Georgia? If you're able to land a really talented guy like Blackshear this, on Sunday, and then you continue to keep yourself at the top for Wiley, now you've got a bunch of wide receivers that have been on campus, guys that continue to get on campus. James Coley's involved in South Florida as well. So, the odds are is that he's going to find a guy in South Florida he likes. But that's where I'm at right now, is that I just think it's going to be incredibly fascinating to watch and see who Georgia ends up adding in this wide receiver class, and then knowing that they'll probably go back to the portal again, because it seems like that's what you do at wide receiver. You grab a guy or two you can plug in and play. But I love what Thomas Blackshear brings to the table. I think he's a guy that can do a little bit of everything for you. I love the fact that, he's talented in basketball and track. Those are obviously traits that translate well to the wide receiver position. And I think Georgia's in a really good spot for him. And he's a guy in any other class you'd be talking about as a clear-cut top wide receiver in the Peach State.
Yeah, I'm really interested just to see what really this 25 class winds up looking like for James Coley, because frankly, I think Brian McClendon sort of was a little underwhelming with the receivers he was able to bring in. Look back at that 23 class. We're just getting ready for the 24 season. they signed 3 of those receivers. There's only one left, Anthony Evans. You had Zeed Haynes transfer, and then you had Tyler Williams leave after spring practice. They signed 2 guys out of this last cycle with Nitro Tuggle and Sokovie White, and I think there is a lot of promise there. But I do think the pressure's kind of on James Coley. Now, the good thing, as you pointed out, Kipp, they seem to really be in the hunt for some of these top receivers. But being in the hunt and landing these guys, that's 2 very different conversations. Just fascinated to see how this plays out for Coley. And I think we will get a better sense of that on Sunday once Thomas Blackshear makes his decision.
Yeah, I think right now, Georgia's got a lot more to sell the wide receivers position than really they've had to, in a long time. I mean, not just, the fact that you've got quarterbacks committed in multiple classes. You've brought in a quarterback transfer that's really talented. That quarterback room looks stacked. And we talked about it, adding multiple quarterbacks the last couple of weeks can now let you go out and recruit the wide receiver position and recruit pass catchers, and that's what Ryan Montgomery's obviously going to be doing with his high school classmates. But at the same time, they just had, a wide receiver drafted as high as they've had since, I really think, AJ Green. I'd have to go back and look, but I think, Lad McConkey going number 34 overall. I think that is the highest that Georgia's had. And that's a long time. What are we talking about here? Like a decade of wide receivers. So over a decade. AJ was what, 2011? So we're talking about 13 years. And with the passing numbers that they just put up, and with the passing numbers that we think they're going to put up this year, which will probably be a much larger distribution to wide receivers, I think they're going to have a lot to sell. So if some of these recruitments go into the season, I think Georgia is going to be well positioned to kind of make a move on a guy or two that maybe they're running second, third, or even fourth with right now. But I think getting a guy like Thomas Blackshear in the boat now, I mean, those are guys that Georgia's missed on in the past, like a Rashad Bateman, that goes to Minnesota and lights it up. Those are the guys you look at and go, how did Georgia miss on this guy in the past? I think Thomas is definitely one of those guys. And I'll be honest, I think he's a guy that in the end will be inside the top 250 overall in this recruiting class is all said and done, because I just think he has a lot of the traits you look for in the wide receiver position, but he also has that mentality that is this kind of rare. A guy that just will go out there and do whatever he's asked to do, has the toughness and instincts to play at a high level. And so I think if Georgia's able to land him this weekend, that's one we'll look back on as being a huge get for the Dogs.
Like we always say, be sure to stay tuned to dogs247.com. We will have everything covered on Blackshear's announcement. And if he does choose Georgia, what that means for the Bulldogs as they continue building on the 25 class. Switching over to the Georgia Men's Basketball Minute, very productive week for Georgia. Since the last time we recorded, Georgia has added 2 more transfers. Power forward RJ Godfrey from Clemson, the son of Randall Godfrey, former Georgia linebacker. And then they added Tyron Lawrence from Vanderbilt, a guy that they were involved with last year when he went in the portal. Kind of went back and forth. It was Georgia, it was Auburn. Then he decides to go back to Vanderbilt, and Georgia winds up bringing home the Georgia native, and he's going to play his last season of eligibility with the Bulldogs. So at this point, Georgia's got 3 open scholarships. Really like what they have done in the portal with the pieces they picked up. I think it was big getting RJ Godfrey. I think he is probably their best 4, especially when you consider his scoring ability. I mean, that they've had certainly since I've come back to covering the team, and I'd have to probably go back and look to give you an answer on who was the best before him, but really like his potential. Tyron Lawrence had a really rough year at Vanderbilt. I don't know if he was playing through injury or just sort of had an off season, but Georgia's very clearly counting on him to really make last year an exception to the rule and to show that he is capable. And I like the pickup. I think it's one of those where, you get him. He's a veteran. He's played in the SEC, which I'm pretty sure he is the only guy with SEC experience that has transferred in I think that's going to be really helpful. So I think Georgia's probably going to add one more player, maybe get a couple of those walk-ons on scholarship. But I'd be looking to see if they add another point guard, because they've really gone guard heavy with what they've added. But a lot of those guys, I think, are better off not playing the one. So see if they go get another guard, another point guard to help Silas out. But really like what they've done reloading this team. I think this roster is going to be better than it was this past season. But as we always say, it's going to come down to wins. Can they find the wins in an SEC that's about to be a 16-team conference? It's not going to be easy, but that's why they pay Mike White the big bucks.
Yeah, and also not just being more prepared for SEC play. What about them potentially playing St. John's in the Bahamas? I saw that news coming out today. That's a heck of a back-to-back now. If you're going to play, St. John's, I think is it the day after? They're supposed to. Are they playing Marquette the day before? I think that's a heck of a back-to-back, just to provide them with some strong non-conference games. I like what I really think doing that last season was key. Just playing a team like Wake Forest or Oregon, Florida State, Notre Dame, those type teams. I just think that it's really, really important that you get a good feel for what you have, but also just to push your players before you start conference play. So I'm really interested to see what this front court looks like, because this is the ability to rebound, but also allow your guards to play on the perimeter and not be asked to attack the boards as much. Get Asa Newell in there, get Somto in there. I really want to see what these guys can do. So the roster makeup seems to be strong, and yeah, if they're using one more spot, I'm looking forward to seeing who it is. If they can, get one more guy, convince them to come in there and compete for minutes in what looks like one of the deeper rosters Georgia's had in a while.
Yeah, I may have to talk to our boss about sending me to the Bahamas just because of these marquee matchups. Marquette, Shaka Smart, St. John's and Rick Pitino. I think that would pay off. And I'm just doing my job. It could be anywhere. It just happens to be the Bahamas.
These are the stories you can only really, you can only get in person. And so I really support your pitch. And hopefully the people listening to this who write our checks or, agree with you, but also looking forward to watching it on TV with you as well.
Shout out Thomas T-Bone and David Williams on YouTube. Dropped in some of the comments, throwing out some Go Dogs. We appreciate you guys watching. All right, Kipp, I kind of prepped you for this before we started recording, but part of the trip that you made to Italy, part of the problem for us was we didn't get to hear your NFL draft insights. So the draft was going on while you guys were on vacation. And I'm going to start with the positive. Tell me what you thought about how the draft played out for the Georgia players. Is there anyone in particular that you really liked their fit, or just general thoughts you had about the Georgia players who wound up being drafted?
Yeah, I think I guess if I'm picking kind of a winner, I really love the fact that even though it's not, I don't want to see him in the NFC South, but I thought Tyke Smith going in the third round in the top 90. It not just great for him and a great fit for him as far as having a chance to step into a depleted safety room, but also just, that's a great story about a guy that, came in and got injured, had people questioning whether he could play in the SEC, after being an All-American as a freshman at West Virginia, and proving to everyone that he was as good as everyone thought he was coming in, and being, arguably Georgia's top playmaker on defense all over the field. For him to be able to hear his name called in the third round was just a testament to his work ethic and everything, that he worked so hard to earn. I think that kind of stood out to me. overall, I think it went pretty much chalk. I mean, we knew that there were two for sure first rounders for Georgia, and I don't love the fit for Brock Bowers going to a team that doesn't have a quarterback, that just spent a second rounder on the tight end position, even though you can use them however. It's not an organization that's really running in all cylinders right now. Marius Sims going to a team that needed tackle help. I think it should be a good fit for him, and love the fit for Lad McConkey. I think he's going to put up huge numbers with the Chargers, and just barely missed the first round. That's kind of where we all kind of thought. We thought around 30 would be right where he went, and 38 would probably be his floor. So that wasn't a surprise. I thought Kamari Lassiter would be in the mix at 43 for the Falcons. So going 42 was right around there, and Javon Bullard, close to 60. So I think everything else kind of went as planned. You would have loved to have seen Cedric Van Pran go in the top 100, but it was a really deep center class. And a lot of these guys have, interior offensive line versatility as well. And I mean, the guy just played a ton of snaps at center, and you'd think that helped him, but in this draft, I guess it dinged him a little bit. But good for Zion Logue, also getting drafted as well. I thought that I didn't think he would get drafted, and I thought both of Georgia's running backs would get drafted. But that's the way it goes once you get to that late sixth round. It's like at that point, it's better for you to go find a situation for yourself when you're a running back, because of the limited snaps. If you're a D lineman, you just got to make the top six, and I think Zion has a pretty solid chance of doing just that.
Speaking of Atlanta Falcons draft picks, we have to talk about the Michael Penix pick. Now, I'm going to ask you two different questions. My first one, I want you to paint me a picture of when you found out, because you were in Italy when the draft was going on. I want you to paint me a picture of when you found out and your reaction. And now, a little bit removed from the pick, how are you feeling? What do you think about it with a little bit more time to digest it?
Yeah, I mean, first off, 6 hours ahead of time, and I tried, but I would have lost a complete day in Italy if I had stayed up to actually see who the Falcons picked. So it was the first thing. My eyes open, I go to look at my phone, and I pull that notifications thing down, and there was a it was an audible gasp, and my wife could tell you, she heard me go. I mean, I'm not going to repeat it on the air here, but I definitely had an initial reaction. Sorry to the people in Florence who were in the same building. Hopefully the language barrier helped a little bit to shield their ears from what I said. But it was definitely like the one thing, you did not think would happen. And it is always the one thing you do not think will happen is what happens to the Atlanta Falcons. So that's my initial reaction. And yeah, I've had plenty of time to think about it. If you're a Falcons fan, you're well versed in the art of just trying to trick yourself into thinking it's a good thing. It's an off-season art form of trying to have a bright outlook on what the plan is for the Falcons front office. But I will go ahead and say that the bright side is still darkened by the fact that nobody ever doubles down on the position the way the Falcons just did. And the window for them to outsmart the entire league and set a completely new precedent on how you handle this by giving out $100 million to a quarterback and then drafting a quarterback in the top 10. It's such a narrow window for this to work out perfectly that it would be the most un-Falcons thing ever for Atlanta to have nailed this decision. And I couldn't even outline how that would even go down. It would you'd have to go on a back-to-back Super Bowl ride, and he just retires. Kirk Cousins retires. That's not going to happen. Honestly, the best case now for the Falcons is that Michael Penix looks so good in camp and the Raiders look so bad in camp that they offer the Falcons, a pick or a player to trade for Kirk Cousins in August. It's the absolute best case scenario. It's not going to happen. But the only other bright side I could have as a Falcons fan is what we just watched Marcus Mariota and Desmond Ridder give us the worst quarterback play we could possibly have had in the last 3 decades. And they overcompensated, but at least we think we're going to get better quarterback play the next decade. That is me still having that rose tinted glasses Falcons outlook, and I would not have done what they've done, and I don't think anyone but the Falcons front office would have done what they've done. So good luck to those guys. Hopefully you've pinned your career to outsmarting the rest of the league. But you probably didn't.
I've sort of got in my head that scene from The Hangover where Ed Helms tells Zach Galifianakis, "You're literally too stupid to insult," and Zach Galifianakis says, "Thank you." I kind of feel like that's like what everybody's done to the Falcons. They're like, well, thank we think differently here. So I had my heart in that moment so set on, oh my God, they're going to steal Roma Dunze right here, and they're about to give Kirk Cousins another great receiver, and they did pick a Washington Husky. It just wasn't the one that I had my heart set on.
They picked more than one in that draft, but yeah, Kirk Cousins, man. I want to say I feel bad for you, but I think you have 100 million reasons to not feel terrible about it. The fact that you're set to make more in your career than Tom Brady did. You are in the Hall of Fame by yourself, and laying in the bag. And so, listen, I bet he was shocked. I'm sure he was. If Penix looks great in camp, I really hope he's upset and goes and asks for a trade. And the fact that 2 weeks after the draft, we're already talking about we hope that Kirk Cousins wants out. I mean, that's something you can only do with the Atlanta Falcons. It's a special skill set that we have, and I think it really brings the fan base together and allows us. It toughens the skin like a few other fan bases can really know. And so it brings everyone together. So I do want to thank the franchise for continuing to do something like that, because you're covering a team like Georgia and seeing a team like the Braves, you can get really spoiled. And so there's always that balance for fans that are fans of all of these teams to have. And the Falcons do bring balance to the force.
Truly deep and surely spot on, which we'll see if Michael Penix can be as spot on as an Atlanta Falcon. We're going to wrap up this episode right there. I appreciate everyone who watched this live, everyone who is listening to this after the fact. If you have not, be sure to subscribe to this podcast. Make sure and follow it. Make sure and leave a rating, leave a review. We want to hear what you guys think. We want to make sure we are giving you guys everything you want. Be sure to go to dogs247.com and subscribe. Again, keep an eye out on Sunday with Thomas Blackshear getting ready to commit. If he does choose Georgia, there will be a lot of content there. Be sure to go to YouTube and subscribe to Dogs247. Get all of these podcasts there, and we'll have more video to come in the next few weeks and months. And before long, we'll be at SEC Media Days, and I'm sure we'll have video of Kirby Smart and players there. Also, go to TikTok and subscribe to Dogs 24/7. A lot of content there. So, for Kipp Adams, I am Jordan Hill. Thanks, everybody. Want to give a shout out to all the moms getting ready for Mother's Day. Hope you guys have a great Sunday. Have a chance to hang out and celebrate your day. And until next time, take care, everybody.